Well, this is The Fix. You are watching, of course, with us, our panel of experts. We're looking at the big stories that's going to be the talking points. And joining me now is Ibrahim Fakir, a political analyst, as well as Karen Morn from TISO Black Star, specialist reporter. Karen, let's get started with you. Towards the end of last week, you, of course, wrote this speculative piece about whether or not Shaun Abrahams' time is up. We know that the Court has taken exceptionally long to make a decision about, what is going to be happening to him. We saw the president essentially telling both the two discredited NPA heads or deputy heads that they need to forward reasons for not why he shouldn't suspend them. From where you're sitting, are we likely to get a Court decision? And if so, is Shaun in or out?
Well, basically, the information that we have is while the court has been very split on this issue, with many of the justices feeling that, removing Shaun Abrahams as a consequence of the illegal 17.3 million rand golden handshake that was given to his predecessor, Mxolisi Mkhosana, may not be fair and equitable to him, that a decision of some kind has now been reached, and that there will be a decision that is ultimately made, that as a consequence of that illegal deal leading to Mkhosana's removal, it cannot be said that Shaun Abrahams was validly appointed. And I think the court will be at pains to say that this does not amount to a finding that he is unfit to hold the position, that it may well be within the ambit of President Cyril Ramaphosa to appoint him again if he sees so fit. But that, in fact, Shaun Abrahams, it will not go as far as the North Gauteng High Court did in terms of saying that Shaun Abrahams, wasn't necessarily the right candidate, which the court suggested was the case in its ruling. This has been a case that was heard on the 28th of February, just a few days after President Cyril Ramaphosa assumed office, 2 weeks after those raids on the Gupta properties and the resignation of President Jacob Zuma. And certainly the court's time that it's taken in reaching this decision realizes some of the political and legal thorniness of what they are trying to decide here.
Peter, you wrote recently a piece about the fact that someone like Vusi Pikoli should be a person that replaces someone like Shaun Abrahams. Karen has, of course, thrown Vusi Pikoli's name right into that hat.
I probably got it from her in the first place.
Yeah. Do you think that he's the guy that is likely to take, over that position?
I don't know. I mean, what I do know is that Cyril's first choice for that position would have been Thuli Madonsela, and that he has asked her, and she said absolutely not. And the other two names that come to, that I keep hearing as leader of the NPA is Vusi Pikoli and as Deputy Glynis Breitenbach of the DA.
Wow. Ibrahim, do you think that Cyril Ramaphosa will go that far, that we will get someone from the Democratic Alliance that was in the old Scorpions, that was in the NPA, became an MP, and be the deputy? Do you think that is how he will go?
If it were entirely up to him, he would. Simply because it's part of his strategy, grand strategy of reaching out across the political divide, across divides in society. But alas, I'm afraid that a faction in the ANC is going to push him in a specific direction. And though he would like to, I don't think he'll do it, because he'll simply get pushback. So much of that pushback will come from inside the ANC.
Karen, your sense, I mean, you know the players, you know who's involved. Apart from Vusi Pikoli, a lot of people have asked, will Vusi Pikoli be prepared to take it, considering what he was put through? I mean, he was pretty wounded when he was sacked by none other than Kgalema Motlanthe, if I'm not mistaken, at the time that he was president. What is your sense? Is Vusi Pikoli ready to take up this position? Are other people being seriously considered? And if so, who are they?
Well, my understanding is that when that matter was in fact heard in the Constitutional Court, he had already been approached, because at the time that the case was heard, it was thought to be a fairly cut and dried matter, that the court would reinforce the finding of the North Gauteng High Court led by Dunstan and Mlambo that there was an invalid appointment, and that this case would be, the judgment would be handed down within the normal requisite 3 months. That simply did not happen. And I know that Vusi Pikoli has been approached. That has been confirmed by individuals in the presidency. I've been told that he had agreed reluctantly, but of course he's not commenting on record in any way, shape or form, which I think, given the sensitivities of this situation, is wise. There are also legal questions, for example, Karima, around the fact that he accepted a 7.5 million rand settlement in the wake of his dismissal by Motlanthe and the launching of potentially long-winded and acrimonious legal action against the presidency and government over that dismissal. There are questions about whether he would have to, for instance, hand that settlement back in terms of him resuming that role. So there are a lot of legal questions around that. But for many people, Vusi Pikoli represents an NPA that, in the eyes of many people, had credibility. He lost his job on his version, and it very much came through in the Ginwala inquiry because of the fact that he had insisted on prosecuting Jackie Selebi, who was a close ally of former President Thabo Mbeki. He also went on to say that he believed in his court papers that he was not allowed back into the fold of the NPA because there was a real suspicion that he would not drop the case against former President Jacob Zuma and accede to his representations. So he is a career prosecutor. He does have the faith and backing of many of the old school prosecutors within that institution, including, I would dare to speculate, someone like Billy Downer, who worked under him in the Zuma case and as I understand still has a massive amount of respect for him. But as you pointed out, he was deeply wounded by what happened and he does still bear the scars of those particular circumstances. It's really going to be up to the president to make a decision if he can use Pikoli as a mechanism to signal that the NPA can go back to some semblance of what it initially intended to be, or whether there's now a need for a completely new person who has that kind of prosecutorial and political insight to take the institution out of the kind of morass that it currently finds itself in.
Karen, thank you so much for that story. We will, of course, be looking out for your news from the Concord as and when it happens. Now, gentlemen, the idea of course, people working across parties is not a bad idea, particularly if one looks at professionalizing the fight against corruption. President Cyril Ramaphosa cannot be seen to be using state institutions to settle political scores.
No, well, I think Becky Taylor just hired Leonard Max from the DA to help him, and maybe he's a different proposition to Glynis. Yeah. But if you wanted a tough prosecutor backing up the head of the NPA, she'd be ideal.
Ibrahim, you're thinking that he'll be too hamstrung by the impediments?
Well, I think the impediments are largely not of a generous nature. They're not, they're not because she lacks institutional experience or the qualifications. She's got the institutional experience. I mean, she's been in the NPA, in the heart of it for many years, prosecuted many successful cases. The fears would be that she comes now straight from the benches of an opposition party, and will she cherry pick cases on the basis of her political inclination? I'm not sure that ought to be a consideration, because the guidelines for prosecutors are pretty clear. You've got the constitution, you've got the legal mandate, you'll have investigations, you'll have evidence, and that's what she has to be guided by. So I don't think that should be a fear.
I mean, what she would be very good at is re-establishing a connection between prosecutions and the police, because Zuma broke that when they lost the Scorpions. And putting that together, it existed before the Scorpions. And it can be resuscitated in some way. But,
Talking about the DA, of course, today was big news for the mayor of the Western Cape city, in the Cape Town mayor, effectively. Let's have a listen to Patricia de Lille's explanation for why she accepted this deal. I'm very keen to hear you guys' views on who essentially won, or whether anyone won today, considering what Musi Maimane had to say. Let's have a listen to Patricia.
I'm very pleased to announce today that I've reached an agreement with the Democratic Alliance, as a leader has said, because I've always maintained that I'm innocent and that the allegations against me have never been proven. And this is why I always insisted on the opening up the disciplinary hearing to the media. Now that the charges have been dropped and withdrawn, I can now get on with my life.
I can get on with my life. She's not out of the woods yet, though, hey, Peter?
Well, I don't know. She's going to be the mayor until, what, the end of October.
Yeah.
Is she going to remain a member of the DA?
Yes, according to her and Vusi, they
Well,
are.
good for her, you know. I mean, she'll hang in there and cause as much trouble as she possibly can. It was nice, I have to say, and to see the two of them together, to see him taking the lead on something that must have a very complicated background to it. But to see him standing up and speaking as the leader of the party without 1,000 people hanging on his shoulders.
I hear Ibrahim laughing. Is Vusi in control? Did he actually broker this deal despite opposition from people like John Steenhuisen and some others who many people have accused are actually the real power in the party?
He probably has, and excuse the pun, but this is a bit of a fix. And it's a fix because there's no one who's coming out of this cleanly.
Yeah.
What it does, and I mean, I think Peter's right that, Vusi is sort of demonstrated some kind of leadership today, but I'm afraid it's going to come back to haunt him, and it has already on several cases. So if you think about Diane Kohler-Barnard, you think about Helen Zille herself, the application of the rules is entirely inconsistent. There is absolutely no fidelity in the way in which they inculcate and apply their own rules in terms of the internal processes. But that doesn't let Auntie Pat off the hook, because Patricia de Lille herself has played this game. So all of the complaints about Jacob Zuma obfuscating, using rules of procedure in the party and using rules of procedure in the state to further your own specific interests is precisely what she has done. And I think this is going to be her undoing in terms of the legitimacy of who she is, because for all of that acrimony that exists in the DA, Peter, I don't know what happens to all of that now.
Yeah, look, I mean, parties, it's in every party, they all sort of work around it, they live off it in a way. And these public appearances are what they are. I mean, it's a fix.
And it is a fix. One of the things that is interesting, of course, that is coming back to haunt us from our past, Peter, you and I were chatting about it earlier, is this expose, this new book that has now been written about the pedophile ring that existed involving no less than the former Defense Minister Magnus Malan during apartheid South Africa. Your sense about it, I mean, when I was growing up, that was a kind of an open secret. Everyone knew that Wiley shot himself because he was supposed to.
Look, I was away from South Africa in the 80s, so I know who Wiley was, but nothing about the story that I've read today surprises me. Power and what's the word? Dishonesty travel hand in hand, particularly perhaps in South African politics. The only thing missing from the story is a Dwomini. Who knows about it?
Ibrahim, your take?
Yeah, I mean, it lays bare the kind of immoral skeletons which existed in the closet. I mean, the reality is you're now talking about people who are completely out of the public eye, and had there been a different set of circumstances, then we can make whatever moral judgments we want. But the reality is that the criminal justice system is to now kick in. And for those who are around and available, there has to be specific charges brought.
Maybe we should have Rolf Meyer on to tell us what he knows of that time.
No, but I was going to make this point. This all happened in the 80s. These people are still alive. A lot of those victims are still alive. They must come and tell their stories. And the story of the National Party can be better and better and better told.
Absolutely.
And this is great. And I think Rolf Meyer ought to come forward and tell us what he knows.
In fact, everybody who has something to say, of course, need to come forward. Gentlemen, thank you so very much. Still ahead on The Fix, the cool stuff.